Now, I showed you last night the ABC's effort to run down nuclear energy. It was pretty incredible stuff from the public broadcaster, actually setting out to debunk a coalition policy. In doing so, they tried to portray a technology that's successful in nearly all developed economies and which is being tripled over the next 2 decades. Well, the ABC tried to pretend it can't work in Australia. And they rolled out the usual suspects.
How would you describe a policy to build 7 nuclear plants in Australia?
Recklessly stupid and dangerously stupid.
I still can't get over recklessly stupid from the bloke who gave us Snowy Hydro 2.0. But let's move on to nuclear. And I'm joined on the desk now by Helen Cook from GNE Advisory. Great to catch up with you again, Helen.
Nice to see you, Chris.
What did you make of that Four Corners piece? It was essentially trying to say that nuclear energy that's powering so much of the world as we speak can't work in Australia.
Yeah, it did seem to be an attempt to take down parts of the coalition's policy using American voices. And I thought that was a shame because it didn't accurately portray what America and Americans think about nuclear energy. The majority of Americans, according to the most recent polling, support nuclear energy. We know that politically it's a bipartisan issue. When Secretary Granholm opened those Vogel units that were the focus of the report, she said 2 down, 198 to go.
Wow. Yeah, I mentioned the other day the Biden administration is really going big on nuclear, reviving old reactors and building new ones.
That's right.
Let's just have a look at some of the program then. Here's some commentary from America.
In this industry, vendor claims about cheaper nuclear costs have a long, well-documented and very sad history. They just don't come true. There is no basis for believing that this utterly unproven technology is going to sweep in and make a success of a field that up to now has been an unmitigated economic failure.
So what's the unproven technology and unmitigated failure he's talking about there?
Look, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but what I will say is that that's an example to me of where this piece was just unbalanced. You know, I'm sure he was used because of his seniority, the fact that he is a former NRC commissioner, but there are many, in fact, the majority of NRC commissioners that are pro-nuclear, that are actively involved in supporting the nuclear industry today. You know, Bill Magwood, the current Director General of the Nuclear Energy Agency of the OECD, former commissioner came to mind. Christine Svinicki, the longest serving commissioner on the NRC, she came to my mind. She's currently on the board of a number of nuclear energy companies in the United States.
Well, the economics must stack up, right? Because so many governments are pushing nuclear and expanding it, and so much of that is being delivered by private enterprise. In fact, 3 Mile Island is going to be fired up because of a contract with Microsoft. So it's the private sector demanding this. The numbers must add up, therefore.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I've just come back from the International Atomic Energy Agency's annual general conference in Vienna, where country after country got up and spoke positively about their plans to roll out nuclear energy, recognising its potential contribution to our decarbonised energy systems and including the ability to supply that reliable energy that we know we need for things like AI.
Well, what about the cost to consumers? That's something that critics focus on. Here's a little bit from the ABC Four Corners report focusing on costs in Georgia.
Consumers like Anna Hamer are paying the price of the cost overruns. In July, she was hit with her highest power bill ever, $618 for 1 month.
They were telling us everything was going to be okay with this plan, that it would be on time and it would be on budget. It's over budget, and we are paying for that. And that seems wrong to me.
Well, no one's seen worse increases in their power bills than Australians, and that's not from nuclear. But let's get to the chase here, though. Can nuclear deliver reliable, affordable power?
Yeah, absolutely it can. And here's again where I think we missed a bit of context last night. So they are paying in Georgia for that first-of-a-kind technology. That's what they're doing. We won't have to do that because it is now longer first-of-a-kind. No, and that is not what the coalition's policy is. It's quite expressly proven technology. And that AP1000 plant now is going to be built in China, it's going to be built in Bulgaria, in Poland, in the Ukraine, it's shortlisted in Sweden, it's shortlisted in the Netherlands. Like, it is going to be nth of an nth of an nth of a kind. context, though, that we didn't get when we heard about the increasing power bills in Georgia is that those power bills, as based on the available information today, are still below average or about average compared to the other states in America. And as you said, we are paying higher prices today.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? Just briefly, I want to show another one of the usual suspects that the ABC are incredibly used as an expert.
If nuclear advocates can show me that adding nuclear to Australia's grid would help us decarbonise faster and cheaper, then I'll be in the trenches with them. If they want Australians to embrace nuclear, they've got to do the work. But that work hasn't been done.
Now, this bloke's not open-minded about nuclear. He's a huge renewables investor, and he's spent the last 5 years of his life on a political push into renewables and bankrolling the deals.
I'll leave you to make those comments, Chris, but I'll focus on just a few of my thoughts coming out of the substance of what he said. First, he talks about nuclear energy being too slow, and we hear that often, and yet some of the fastest rollouts of low carbon energy anywhere are actually nuclear. Now, I was in Sweden just a couple of weeks ago. Sweden plans to have 2 large reactors online by 2035 and 10 gigawatts by 2045. Wow. And when people say, well, that's ambitious, Sweden says, we've done it before. And indeed they have. In the 60s to the 80s, they put on their grid exactly the same amount that they want to roll out over the next 20 years. So it can be done.
The UAE also did it in a decade.
The UAE has done it very quickly. Now, the other thing that I take issue with in Simon's comments is the idea that we should, as Australia, just sit and do nothing and just wait. Because if we sit and do nothing and just wait, then people like Simon in a few years' time will be able to say the same thing, which is, oh, it's going to be too slow. Now, one of the reasons...
We've got to stick with the windmills because everything's running out of time. It is ridiculous, but thanks for picking those holes in it for us, Helen. I appreciate your time. Helen Cook there on what the ABC is trying to spin us on nuclear.